Hey, what's up everybody? I don't know if you guys like Final Fantasy, you hate Final Fantasy. I've been playing it for a long time. Plus I've watched all those cool movies like Ghost in the Machine and all of these. And I'm just kind of a big fan of the entire genre altogether, I gotta be honest with you. So Final Fantasy 15 Windows Edition, it just hit the streets. Takes up so much space, you almost need to like get yourself a huge storage center just for this particular game. But the graphics are very nice, and it's a little bit different than any other Final Fantasy game that has ever been out, you know, because it's a totally first-person type experience, unlike anything I've ever seen before. And the graphics, I gotta say, even though the characters look a little bit cartoony, the graphics themselves are very nice. The skies are clear, the clouds look great, everything is nice and focused, and so what we decided that we would do is we would show you guys how a bunch of different video cards would playing this game. Now obviously we use our test system, and I just gotta say this though, you guys have always stressed in the past and we've found out that it's true. Having the best video card is really more important than the CPU. Even though the CPU does help, having the best video card is the absolute best. So if you have a much lower, end CPU, there might be a few frames per difference, between your system and ours, but overall our system is just the standard i7 8700K, and we don't have it overclocked or anything. We just ran it just on stock, and then we tested it and bring you these different things. So let's jump in. We also filmed the graphics, did the testing separately, and then inlaid the testing for you so that you guys could see the best results. Because obviously when we're playing the game and we're capturing the screen capture, you're going to lose a few frames per second due to that software. So we calculated that stuff outside of that and then brought you guys that stuff. But if you want to see our test system, however, you guys can check it out right here. Here are all the different parts we use. 16 gigabytes of RAM, nice parts all around. It's actually a very nice system. Somebody's specs are probably going to be a little bit lower, but you guys get the gist of what we're trying to say through this. So now, with that said though, let's jump in and let's do the AMD cards first. We tested 4 AMD cards, all the way from an entry-level 560 all the way up to the bad boy, the 64. That's right. So let's jump in. Now I know one question that everybody's going to want to ask before we jump in and show you guys the scores is, what settings did you have it on? We had it on the highest settings for all cards through all games. Now we used the 560 all the way up to the Vega 64 on the AMD side of things, and on the NVIDIA side of things we use the 1050 Ti, the 1070 Ti, and the 1080 Ti. So let's jump in and let's check out those games. Also, on the NVIDIA side of things, we turned off silly things like Hairworks and those type of things so that both cards would be tested on an even field. Let's go. Our entry-level card on the AMD side of things is the ASUS RX 560 Overclock Edition card. Now, on 4K, the card got 7 frames per second. Now remember, this is with everything set to its maximum. 1440 at 11 frames per second, and 1080 at 15 frames per second. Now obviously, if you play the game with other settings turned off or set it at lower values, your card will play it much better.
Says there's a city.
It's time. Gladio, come on.
Gotcha.
Want to go check it out?
What is it?
Now, the AMD RX 480 jumps in a little better. At 4K, we see 20 frames per second. At 1440, 36 frames per second. And at 1080, 50 frames per second.
Feels so sluggish. Indeed. Better make tracks. Chop chop, Prompto.
There in a jiffy!
Want to go check it out?
What is it?
Well,
Next up, the AMD RX 580. Not too much different than the 480, just a few frames per second with 4K at 23, 1440 at 41, and 1080 at 56, right underneath that 60, which is a sweet spot.
Yeah.
50 Gil says there's a city car.
Better make tracks. Ignis, we're going.
On my way.
See ya!
Want to go check it out?
What is it?
Now, the Red Devil RX VEGA 64, it does a lot better. 4K at 38 frames per second, like I said before, 4K is really not here. 1440 at 66 frames per second, and at 1080, 87 frames per second.
See ya! Hey!
So you guys can see that if you want to play this game with all of its settings to the maximum, you actually need like a VEGA 64 or a VEGA 56, because the other cards are all coming in at under 60 frames per second, even at 1080. But like I said, you can lower the settings. Let's check out the NVIDIA side of things.
Want to go check it out?
What is it?
The entry-level card we used on NVIDIA's side of things is the ZOTAC GTX 1050 Ti mini card. Now at 4K, this card got 12 frames per second. At 1440, 23 frames per second. And at 1080, 34 frames per second.
See ya!
Want to go check it out?
What is it?
Next up is the GTX 1070 Ti. At 4K, you get 35 frames per second. 1440, you get 63 frames per second, and with the 1080, 87 frames per second. And honestly, folks, this is probably the sweet spot of everything for this particular game.
See ya! Hey!
Eyes forward.
Didn't mean to do that. How far are we going?
Got plenty of time. Want to go check it out?
What is it?
So next up, the GTX 1080 Ti, and at 4K, it gets really close to that 60 frames per second sweet spot with 50 frames per second. At 1440, it kills at 86 frames per second, and at 1080, 109 frames per second.
See ya! nice here.
Yeah.
So all right guys, here is the bottom line. This game is very demanding on your video card. This is a very, very demanding game. If you want to play this game and you want to have ultra high frames per second, you're going to have a high-end video card. And the only thing is right now, that's kind of a real slap to the face to everybody out there with video card prices being the way that they are, because you just can't get a hold of these high-end video cards unless you do something like build, a pre-built system, which we talk about, which a lot of people don't like, but one of the only ways that you can do this. Now, unfortunately, so I know you guys probably will trip out on this, is that this game does not work on a Mac at all, because an iMac actually these days comes with a 580 inside of it, and they're about $2,000. And if you're not like totally dedicated to anything, or a crazy guy who just wants to, who only wants a hardcore PC, they actually play most games pretty well, especially games that are like this, that don't have, so many special effects going all over the place too much. But that's another whole story. You guys see how the game plays. I like it a lot. It's a pretty cool game. We'll bring you guys more footage with more cards and different aspects of it as we go along. We're actually going to test it on some lower systems, completely lower, like entry-level completely system with lower CPUs, lower memory, all that stuff, just to see how it plays. And also we'll play it on a couple lower-end laptops and see how that does as well. So that's it, folks. Thanks for watching the channel. Like usual, down below the like button, we'll have a link to this game if you want to check it out for yourself. If they had any demo of this game, you guys should definitely check it out and play the demo, because I think it'll reel you in. You'll want to play it. And for fans of Final Fantasy, hey, it's the 15th frickin' version, man. Obviously, it's around for a long time. If you want to see me here on the channel again, subscribe, and I'll see you here.